Hi, this is Her Voice Unfiltered, where the words don't ask for permission, they just arrive. I'm Michonne, poet, healer, storyteller, and this right here, this is where we feel it before we fix it. So, let's put some feeling to these words. I've been thinking about how often people misunderstand boundaries. They call them distance, they call them walls, they call them rejection. But what if boundaries are actually a form of reverence? What if a boundary is simply the shape peace takes when it decides to protect itself? Today on Her Voice Unfiltered, we're talking about sacred boundaries. Not walls built from bitterness, but holy lines drawn by healing. So, what is a sacred boundary? I believe it is a limit set in alignment with peace, wisdom, and God's care. Not a wall to keep love out, more like a gate that protects what God is growing. It's not avoidance, it's stewardship. Not punishment, but protection. Not hardness, just discernment. And did you know that scripture absolutely supports this? Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Scripture doesn't tell us to leave our hearts unguarded in the name of being loved. It says guard your heart because what flows from it is sacred. There was a time I thought saying no made me cold. I thought access meant love. Availability meant loyalty. Endurance meant strength. But healing has taught me something different. Sometimes no is a complete prayer. So let's dive into segment 1. Boundaries are protection, not punishment. When I realized setting boundaries was okay and was a part of my healing and not me being standoffish, I started seeing boundaries in scripture. Guard your heart. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Even Jesus withdrew at one point. Even Nehemiah built walls. Nehemiah didn't rebuild walls out of bitterness. He rebuilt them to protect what God was restoring. Some boundaries are rebuilding and protecting sacred work. And I also realized sometimes a boundary is not a lack of faith. It is faith protecting what God is restoring. I used to think boundaries were something you only created after being hurt. But I'm learning boundaries are not always a reaction to pain. Sometimes they're preparation for peace. A healthy boundary says, I can love you and still limit what harms me. I can be kind without abandoning myself. I can forgive without reopening every door. That is not punishment. That is stewardship. And I think so many of us, especially women, were taught to confuse overextending with love, to overexplain, to overgive, to overstay, to keep access open long after peace has left the room. But boundaries will allow us to whisper, enough. How many times has the word no sounded like rejection to you? Let's take a look at the word no from a different perspective as we jump into segment 2, when no became a healing word. I used to hear no as guilt. Now I hear no as clarity. No to what drains me. No to what confuses me. No to what dishonors what I'm building. And no doesn't have to arrive angry. Sometimes no sounds soft. Sometimes no sounds holy. Sometimes no says, I wish you well, but you cannot live here anymore. Not in my mind, not in my peace, not in my spirit. And woo, baby, that kind of no, that one heals. And maybe that's where this next piece lives, in discernment, in protection, in the moment you stop calling every closed door a loss and realize some doors close because your spirit finally learned what it needed to guard. So this piece is called Access Denied. There was a time anything could enter. Unhealed people, half love, sweet lies dressed like rescue. I left the door cracked, calling it compassion, called survival hospitality, called betrayal a lesson. But healing changed the locks, and now access is denied to confusion, denied to inconsistency, denied to anyone who only knows how to visit me in pieces, denied. You don't get VIP entry because you knew me when I was bleeding. You don't get backstage passes to a woman who had to rebuild her sanctuary. No, there's security at the gate, and they are armed with the word and trained in the art of discernment. And peace has a clipboard. It checks names. Fear, not listed. Manipulation, turned away. Old versions of me begging to be chosen, expired credentials. Access denied. Because my spirit learned every open door is not an invitation from God. Some doors are breaches. Some smiles are phishing scams. Some love stories are malware. And I updated my iOS and my firewall. Now, only what honors me gets through. Truth has a password. Reciprocity has clearance. Soft love gets fingerprint access. And the divine, facial recognition. Everything else, unauthorized, blocked, rejected, access denied. And if you hear silence from me, Don't confuse it with bitterness. It's boundaries with good posture. It's healing, saying you can knock, but not every knock deserves an answer. Because I finally learned protecting my peace is not rejection. It is sacred administration. And some of us weren't called to keep reopening wounds for people who refuse to wash their hands. No, this heart is no longer public property. This soul is not open source. This woman requires credentials. And if your presence threatens what took me years to restore, the spirit will respond before I do. Access denied. After a heavy conversation about boundaries, it can be easy to think love has become smaller, almost non-existent in this world today where it seems like lasting love is unattainable. But that isn't what healing has taught me. Boundaries do not make me less loving. They made me more discerning about where love can live. I used to think being guarded meant being closed. But there's a difference between guarded and unavailable. Being guarded can mean I have a gate instead of a wall. There is still entry. There is just discernment. And that has been healing for me. Learning I do not have to choose between protecting my peace and remaining open to love. Because healthy love does not resent boundaries. Healthy love honors them. The right people do not force doors. They knock. They respect timing. They honor capacity. They don't demand access that hasn't been entrusted. And that's a big one. And maybe that's what I'm learning. I'm not building fences to keep love out. I'm tending a garden. The garden of my heart. And gardens have gates. Scripture says love protects. Not just others. It protects what is sacred. Real love doesn't trample boundaries. Real love can sit at the gate and still stay. So, yes, love is still possible after boundaries. That love may even be truer, safer, holier, because now love has to meet me where self-respect lives. And maybe being guarded but open looks just like this. My heart is not closed. It's curated. Maybe boundaries aren't evidence that love has grown smaller. Maybe they are proof that self-respect has grown stronger. Maybe peace needs gates. Maybe healing needs fences. Maybe some things stay sacred because they're protected. I built a gate, not a graveyard. And I want to leave you with this. Anything holy requires stewardship. Even your peace, even your voice, and especially your heart. And if no one has told you lately, no can be a healing word. Boundaries can be sacred, and protecting your peace does not make you difficult. It makes you wise. This has been Her Voice, Unfiltered. I'm Michonne Fabio. And until next time, therapy complete.